All right, welcome everyone to the Educator Collaborative Spring Gathering 2024. Today we will be sharing a variety of things related to poetry. Our title is Poetry and Community, Healing and Joy.
Over the last several years, we have immersed ourselves in poetry and more recently have focused on uncovering the healing aspects of the genre, both in the writing and in the togetherness that poetry offers. Though through the making involved, there's an intersection of healing and poetry that ultimately brings joy.
So hi, everybody. We are a group of teacher poets, and we all met online writing poetry together. So my name is Sarah Donovan, and I founded Ethical ELA, which is a website in 2015 just to write about my teaching practice. And in 2019, it evolved into a space for writing a poem a day during April. And teachers were really excited about writing with their students, but then we realized that we needed a space for our own poetry to write for and with one another. And that grew incredibly in 2020 as the need for greater healing and togetherness emerged and while we were all working remotely. So that April 2020, we wrote a ton of poems and a lot of people were involved, and we started really communicating and building a network among us all to a oral history project where we interviewed and recorded one another, sharing what it was like teaching during COVID, the and the inequities that we experienced, which led to publishing an anthology of poetry together. And that sparked other connections. So we're just a little bit about that before we get into the work.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacey Joy, and I'm joining in from Los Angeles, California. And it was an honor and a pleasure to be able to participate on Ethical ELA with Sarah Donovan and our other friends here, as well as the many others across the nation, as we were embarking upon being teachers and writers during the pandemic. That was an especially challenging time, but through that time, we also connected at NCTE in 2022 and had a chance to co-present along with some other teachers as well as Sarah and Jennifer. And it was a remarkable experience because we finally got to see one another face to face and embrace and enjoy company and space together. So it's just been an outstandingly warm feeling to even reflect back on 2022 and knowing that we have opportunities to connect again. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stacey. My name is Stefani Boutelier. I'm a teacher educator in West Michigan. And in addition to the pieces that Sarah and Stacey already shared, Jennifer and I are both located in different parts of Michigan. We recently connected in person to also share out at the MRA, Michigan Reading Association conference last weekend.
I'm Jennifer Jowett, and these women are my inspiration. Together, we have written our way through every challenge, every grief, every extraordinary moment imaginable. And ultimately, we find joy in both our writing and in each other. Our writing amplifies both teacher voices and centers on teachers' whole self.
So this is a quick preview of what we will be sharing during our asynchronous professional development that we are creating here today. So Sarah will lead us through some letting go. Jennifer will help us work on finding ourselves and a poetry dump. I will guide us in crafting community in a digital space, and then Stacey will help us with writing joy. And hopefully you leave here today with more joy than you started with. We'd like to start you off by, if you use this QR code or the bit.ly, and you will get this template. So if you can take a moment to connect via the QR code or bit.ly and open up a copy of the template. You'll want to have that to interact with our session today. And while you're doing that, I will just add that we are bringing in, over 4 years of community amongst the four of us and plenty of other people who have been part of Sarah's ethical ELA open rights space. And, we're looking at this from a professional development. And I would just like to add a note that even preparing and setting this up with these lovely women is its own professional development. So that collaboration as we prepped for this was a great learning piece. And a reminder of taking pause to not only kind of understand what we're doing, but also to learn from each other.
All right, so I'm going to take us through a little bit of pre-writing and pre-thinking that's going to get some poetry today. And, we want to support our students in doing this work too. So some time to reflect and get the writing going. So we're not really faced with a blank page when it comes to writing poetry. And then we can ease into it a little bit better. So for our work today, in order to kind of gather toward healing and joy, we want to do some letting go of the grief that we might be feeling at this point in our school year. It's April. We're in spring. Some are in spring break. We're heading toward the end of the school year, and we're bringing probably some different tensions and feelings with us as well. So this first part, we're going to go to the beginning, the top part of your handout that you have. And we're going to do a little bit of writing here. So if you have access to your document, you can type directly into it. If you prefer, you can just have your phone and be typing directly into your phone. That's fine too. So let me do a little think aloud with you, and we're going to talk about it as you type into the document. So what do you need to let go of today? You may be sitting at a computer at work, in between things. You might be listening to this as you're driving. So we're going to think about the things that you need to let go of to serving you, that aren't serving your heart, that aren't serving your mind, that might be draining you. Is it grief? Has there been some loss in your life, whether it's personal or at school? Are you feeling any pain, whether it's physical? And gosh, when I think about the physical pain at this time of the year, and right now I'm thinking about my ankles, like they're throbbing, and I have like these vein ankles from being on my feet all the time. So those kind of things might be by stirring like physical pain. But you might be having some pain in your heart as well. Sometimes we have specific tensions with our students. Students that we are struggling and really trying to find ways to love them, and it might be difficult. And so we're trying to find ways to like our students. We might be having some sort of pain with colleagues or with school or in our school communities. And you might even be having some pain in your family lives, relationships, or with loved ones who might be feeling pain, and you're feeling those as well. Of course, sadness, there might be some sadness that you need to let go of. There's nothing that you can do about it, and it is not serving you, but it might be sapping some of the joy and the potential for healing. And so for me, like, we've all had these different kinds of tensions in our life, but, I have had a family, so that's is kind of taking up a big part of my brain and body right now. And so when I'm about to write poetry, I might think about maybe that to serve me in a particular way. And as I said, I have pain in my ankles and things like that. Let's just hear from a couple other people. Like, what are some of feelings that you want to let go of today? Jennifer, Stephanie, Stacey.
Well, we're about a week away from spring break. So there's the stress of, are we going to get everything done? It's the end of the third quarter before we wrap up in this next week. And then be able to take a breath and use the bathroom when we want to, that kind of thing. So it's all the busy thoughts that are going on right now, the stress of that, the worries about school. And my kids are in a good place right now. Like, there's a good vibe that's happening. And so I'm actually starting to mourn the loss of them at the end of the year, because a new group coming in means starting all of those relationships again.
And I'd like to add in letting go of my exhaustion and feeling guilty that I'm always tired and never caught up. So releasing that and remembering just to be present in the moment, whether that's with my family or if it's in a professional setting, just to do the best I can in that moment, even if I am tired.
I think the one thing that I feel like I need to really let go of is the need to control every minute of my day and start letting things just happen.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. So here we're just, dumping some ideas here, stringing together ideas and phrases with between. And so this is all that we're asking you to do at this time. And maybe you're doing it mentally, and maybe you have an opportunity a little bit. So then we're going to move into the next part where we're thinking about what do you need to say? And so here might draw on the first part, like what do you need to say? It might be some phrases that you need to for comforting yourself or for letting things go. And so for me, I might this comes a lot for me this time of year, is saying that I'm good enough. So I just need to say I'm good enough. I need to say, take care of yourself. I need to say, love yourself. Like those are some words to remind when I'm hard on myself this time of year, especially. There might be some things you need to say to other people, like no, no, I don't have time for that, or with their response other than that, because they don't need to hear your reasons. Just no, doesn't work for me. So those might be some things that you need to say that will help you let go. Maybe sorry, I'm sorry. Or what can I do to make that up to you? Maybe you have caused harm and you ask for a redo. This is something that quite a lot to me with my students. If I snap at them, say something in the moment, and then later I realize that that might have been harsh, I need to go back and ask for a redo and kind of run back that play again and say something that I wish I would have said. Forgiveness. So that comes up a lot too. What comes up for you all? What do you say?
In addition, I would agree with that, saying no. Of course, I'm sure all of us can align with that, but also saying I don't know. Remembering that I don't need to have a response to everything, and that I don't know everything. So reminding myself.
One of my favorite statements is no is a complete sentence.
Love it.
I feel like that would be a good t-shirt. Hashtag.
I guess I would need people to work to understand each other more and to ask questions out of curiosity rather than another motive that they might have.
Yeah. Well, then we'll move into this next part and this is kind of think through here, but what are the injustices day by day, professional and personal life? This is a really big question. And it depends on your context. It depends on who you are. It depends on your place in the world and your school and your life, and also really the socio-political climate that we're in. We're going to be feeling these tensions in different ways. I certainly feel them in Oklahoma way that I didn't when I lived in Chicago. And so these tensions kind of really surface for me. Maybe even thinking about the ways that we have socialized fear more than our own needs for language and definition. So here's this question of what is the worst that could happen if I tell this truth, this pain, or if I release this grief? And what does this truth look like with our students? And so I can think a little bit about an example of this. We were doing some writing in class about our informational essays that we were writing, and we were generating some things that we know a lot about, and thinking about the stories that we can tell from that. And I was thinking about my time before I was a teacher, when I was a social worker, and the best and worst moments from that. And so we're generate some writing about that. And I told the students, my students, when I was doing the writing on the board, it kind of surprised me about this time that I turned away from a person I was supposed to be helping. And I was really ashamed of that moment. But in that moment, I really was like, I just had nothing to give, and I turned away. And what that meant for my students, which was at the end of class, they said that that moment and telling that truth to that I felt like I didn't have enough to give in that moment. They said that it humanized me. And by telling that truth, that I didn't have the answers, that I capacity, that I would like to redo that situation, was a humanizing moment. And so about what it looked like with our students is that we're honest about our capacities, or practice saying no, that it might empower them to do that as well. And that's just a moment that I'm kind of sitting with right now. So that's a complex question, I think. What else would you all add to that one?
I think for teachers who are expected to do so much, we might need to consider how we can separate what student issues are and isolate those away from our personal lives, because I think they tend to invade is a strong word, but they tend to seep into personal lives as well. And for a lot of teachers, that can be incredibly draining. And at this point in the year, we've carried that for a while.
Adding on to that, that weight though, I'm working mostly with adult learners, and that weight comes present. They're bringing in the weight from their professional and personal lives into our classes and learning. Many of them are second career educators that I'm at the graduate level, at least. And so thinking about how we can model that for any age learner of, right? Like, how do we, like Sarah was talking about how she was humanizing it. That's how we build those relationships, right? That sparks those, sparked from those humanizing experiences. And I just lost my train of thought, but I was going somewhere with that related to this, but from what Jennifer said. So I'll let Stacey, did you have anything to add?
Sure. I was thinking about the grief of realizing that my last school year was a challenge for me. And it was a challenge for me because I was still living in fear from COVID. And I never really relaxed and allowed myself to be the new person that I would be in a classroom where I didn't have to have social distancing and I didn't have to teach in a mask. So I think I taught an entire school year in fear. And now I'm grieving what I could have done. I'm grieving the processes that I didn't allow myself to go through to be a better teacher last year. So I'm realizing now that I have a wonderful space and I'm free of that fear, that I owe my students from last year an apology for the year that I gave them and that we had together.
Yeah, I think that's an important process for us each to, go through our own, like we're writing on this document for ourselves. But gosh, what a lovely experience this might be for you to do with a couple of your trusted colleagues, to kind of share these moments about your experiences with it. And one another. I think like hearing Stephanie and Jennifer and Stacey share um, these things that they want to let go of, and these ideas about grief and fear are a way of allowing me to witness and then reciprocate this sharing, which I think is really powerful. And so this last part is thinking about how can we apply these questions in practice, and how can they be kid-centered? This is a practice that we're doing among colleagues as professionals, that we need to do. We need to say, we need to hear or say, And it's not going to look the same as with our students. So thinking about how this can be offer students a space, a regular space in to do some of this writing, sharing, and this connection with how they might be feeling any pain or grief. And so for me, thinking about this, I just have a typical practice at class where we start every day with a write-in. And I usually offer students multiple options for their writing, depending on what they need that day. And we ask the question of how writing can serve us. Like, how can writing serve us? And I have usually something that allows distance, can escape and create a story or write fantasy, so that they can use logic and kind of work through some sort of like argument that they might be thinking, some sort of personal reflection. And then I also encourage them to reject all of my ideas and write about whatever they need that day. And so they know that they can come in and have the space on a daily basis, and some calm at the beginning of class to do some of this writing, whatever they need to get out, whatever they need to name, is just one of the practices that I try to offer students, whether they're feeling pain or grief or joy, or they can't name it. A lot of times it comes up in their writing somehow. And then a quick little sharing, which them offer what they want to offer, and then also listen and be a listener for a peer. And I think there's a lot of power in that, listening to somebody else, that helps us feel like we're being useful, how we're being supportive of somebody else. And that sometimes serves a little need that we might have in our hearts. But this, again, is another big question here. How can this work be kid-centered? Other ideas?
Well, to build upon your idea, Sarah, I think it's really important to give students a voice, and educators sometimes can be scared to allow them to have that voice because they're not quite sure what they're going to say. But kids want to be heard and they want to be recognized. Their writing becomes a see me in a world where they're constantly seeing other people through their screens and don't have those relationships, those personal relationships that they might be having even within their own families. And so by allowing them the space to write and then share, as you mentioned, with each other, with the entire group, we're really giving them the strength of that voice.
One practice I use when I'm teaching online, and this is more for adults, but I think can be transferred to K-12, is I start off with the good news, asking if anyone wants to share any good news. But then over the semester, once everyone's becoming comfortable, it becomes a good news, bad news piece. And because they're more comfortable, they often then start sharing out other things. I try to set a time limit on this so it doesn't kind of hijack the setting. But then this transitions directly into students creating micro goals for the day. So for my setting, that works well. But the idea of thinking about that empowerment piece, when we're looking at trauma-informed practices of allowing the learners to create their expectations, or their, as I call them, micro goals for the learning time, is another way to also consider implementing into practice.
And I would just add that it's so important for me, especially in elementary school, to be able to have time for community circle. So we have a community circle meeting on Fridays where we kind of reflect on our week and share our expectations for the weekend, but it's also a brave space. So students can share if they've been upset or if they've been hurt or if there's somebody they need to apologize to. So it's kind of like just a calm, warm, safe space for students to share and unload.
Thanks. And I think it's really important to mention here that this trauma-informed practice, nurturing a safe space, comes with time, and with the routines that we set up, because, as Stephanie and Jennifer, you can't really declare it to be a safe space at the beginning of the year without practices that cultivate that, and organizing it and facilitating it in a way that nurtures that, and one in the classroom to be contributing to that safety. And writing and sharing poetry is one of those ways. As we get to know one another, that's what nurtures the safety. So I think we've done some letting go, hopefully. I feel a little bit better after that. And so I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer as we move into the next part.
Thank you, Sarah. So let's spend some time finding self. Our writing today begins or finds its origins in the poetry of other strong women. Joy Harjo is an Indigenous poet of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She's a former U.S. Poet Laureate. Her poem, Remember, can be found as audio or written in the links provided. And Ruth Foreman is a Black poet, author, and professor. You will find a link to read her poem on this day. You can access the poem more directly by using the Control F feature, as it's embedded into a lengthier site. We invite you to read the poems and or listen to the poems, spending time within them as you wish. Consider how you connect to the words, their meaning. You might name your favorite lines or write lines of your own remembering or wishing. We would like the poets to inspire you and let the poems move you. You may be drawn to the rhythm of the language and remember, or the emotion and imagery the words of On This Day invoke. Like Harjo, you might begin with remember, and like Foreman, you might start with I wish you. We've provided you some other options as well, such as I hope, I want, or simply I. Begin in whatever way feels best to you. There's a space on the handout to jot your thoughts and lines. You may press pause in this recording as needed to read and to listen to respond. And then that brings us to what we're calling a poetry dump, which is about opening a door. Writers sometimes struggle when prompts are offered to them, and sometimes they feel boxed in when a specific form is suggested. Others can feel completely overwhelmed if there's no form offered at all. So found poems often land in just the right spot, opening a door and welcoming voices in a form that offers both freedom and subtle guidance. So you might choose to write a found poem composed entirely of the lines that you pulled from Harjo and Foreman's pieces. You could pull the lines that move you the most to craft a new poem. You can let go of some of the elements that you used above in your earlier poetic responses. Or you may choose to write a poem inspired by the two poets using the line stems, I remember, or I wish and remember. We offer you now time to pause and write again.
Thank you, Jennifer and Sarah, for leading us through the first parts of letting go of grief and finding self. We now invite you to participate in a digital community via Wakelet. So you can find the QR code here, as well as the join code for Wakelet. And what you'll find on this page is a couple of things. So the first column is what a community poem looked like when Jennifer and I presented at the Michigan Reading Association conference. So this one was in person. So it was a crafted community poem with Post-its. So if you take note here, you can see there were 5 Post-its, and those were written by 5 different people, rearranged into a poetic form. And then underneath that, we added the text of one of those poems so that you visualize what that looks like, or what they actually sounded like, since you can't, it's hard to read those Post-its. So you can see that that's one of the examples of the poems written by 5 different participants in that session. So what we're imagining is that on today, April 13th, and beyond, as people have access to this, that you will again access this Wakelet, go to your drafted poetry dump, for example, and then head over to the Wakelet and add in some lines that you are really feeling, that are demonstrating your memory, your wishes, anything along those lines. And over time, we imagine that each column might represent a poem from different authors around not only the US, but potentially around the world. We'd love for you to add your name as well. So maybe even put in where you're from, and we can kind of just see where this takes us. And if we can create poems from different people at different times, asynchronously around the world. One more tip, since I'm here on Wakelet, is that you can also rearrange. So don't feel that yours needs to go at the top. Once you type yours in, you can move it around and we can create different poems together. So feel free to take pause and interact with that space.
Okay. It's time for us to move into a very fun and exciting form called the Gogioka. The Gogioka was developed by Inta Kusakabe, and it's a traditional poem form that comes sort of from the tanka. I like to say that it's not so much a form like the tanka because it's actually a little bit more free, but you get to focus on what brings you joy and what brings you liberation. And we'll use the Gogioka form to create something that makes us feel joy inside, something that brings us liberation. And we can start with the line of, oh, if teaching had the same amount of joy as, and I'm sure we can think of a ton of things that could be as exciting as, that we want teaching to be as exciting as, or we can go to something that's just a little bit more free. So maybe you'll have something else in mind that you're thinking of. So we shared these Gogioka poems on Ethical ELA back in 2022, and our focus, of course, was liberation and joy. And so what you'll see here is what the platform looks like when we write together on Ethical ELA. You get an inspiration from the person who's hosting. On this particular day, it was my day. And then I share my poem. And then all of the poets on Ethical ELA share their beautiful poems with one another. And we have fun reading and commenting, giving each other lots of love and support, which is another reason why I love Ethical ELA, because it feels so good to see the love and support from one another. So I'd like to share with you my Joy and Liberation poem from April of 2022. Oh, if this land had the same amount of joy as popsicle-stained cheeks and sisters giggling in summer sun. Earth could unclench her fists and smile with rainbows. Oh, if this body could be liberated on kite string or butterfly wings, it would stand naked in the mirror and shout, I am free.
Thank you, Stacey. That just brought me so much joy hearing you read that out loud. I'm going to read mine next. Mine is untitled. Woman Stray Liberation, a play on life, deliverance of the sun rising over a femme horizon, dawns, unfettering potential of rebirth, relief, regret in rhythmic cycles.
Okay, so like Stephanie's, mine doesn't follow the beginning of line prompt like Stacey's did, and that's the joy of this form. It can be anything it wants. So mine is entitled Joyride. No rules, just the words and me, finding themselves completely free in a finger tapping, letter stacking, word shacking, 5-line liberation.
Yes.
Nice. And mine does not have a title either. And it does follow the 5-line, but not the same structure. As you can see, there's lots of space for everybody. One hand can play chords, The same hand can play bass. The other hand can play melodies. But together our hands can progress a song of self.
So the template that you see here gives you the 5 lines, free form, and focusing on what brings you joy. And if you are so inclined to use the "oh, if," you may, or you can use whatever starting line you choose. Just focus on joy or liberation. All right, so we'll take some time for you to think, pause, write, reflect your Gogioka on "oh, if" or whatever you choose. Enjoy your writing time.
All right, as we're wrapping up, we also welcome you to share your Gogioka as well on our shared Wakelet. Again, feel free to add your name and location if you are willing and able, just so we can see where everyone is coming from. And of course, you can join Ethical ELA's Open Ride at any time during April because it is Verse Love, hashtag Verse Love. It is a poetry month. Is that correct? That didn't sound right. April is the month of poetry, but we challenge and welcome you to that space. If you do join us there, feel free to call out where you connected and where you learned about that community as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have placed our contact information there if you have any questions, if you'd like to reach out, if you'd like to share something, and we are more than happy to answer anything that you might wonder about.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.